The federal government is threatening legal action against Stellantis after the automaker unveiled plans to invest $13 billion in the United States over the next 4 years. The decision will shift the slated production of a Jeep model from Brampton, Ontario to Illinois.
I'm extremely disappointed about this decision, and not only am I disappointed, it's completely unacceptable. So we will fight for these jobs. We will fight for the jobs at Brampton, we'll fight for the jobs that were committed by Stellantis, and we'll fight for our auto sector.
For the reaction from the official opposition, we've reached Kyle Seeback. He is the Conservative Party Labour critic. Kyle Seeback, good to see you again. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Yeah, happy to be here, David.
We've heard from Industry Minister Mélanie Joly. She's called this decision by Stellantis completely unacceptable, and the government will fight for these jobs. What do you make of this latest hit to the auto sector?
Well, look, I think her statement and $1.50 gets you a coffee at Tim Hortons. They seem to have outrage for all kinds of things that are happening, but, very little action. This is just absolutely devastating news for the people in Brampton and the workers at that plant. These could be absolutely permanent job losses, 3,000 Canadians who now have to wonder how they're going to pay for things in a terrible cost of living crisis that we're all going through. And President Trump is getting what he wants, a massive investment and a transfer of assembly auto jobs from Canada into the United States. If we remember back in March, Mark Carney said we will build a stronger auto industry, and look at where we are in October. It's the exact opposite that's happened.
The other thing the industry minister has done, she has sent a letter to the chief executive officer of Stellantis in which Mélanie Joly threatens legal action, saying that Stellantis has made legally binding obligations to Canada, and they will hold the company to full account and exercise all options, including legal, and then calling for them to extend supports for the workers who have been essentially furloughed because of the remodeling plan for the plant that was on the books until today. What do you make of the threat of legal action? Is that a strong enough message to send to the company?
Well, look, I guess when you have nothing left to offer, you threaten a company with legal action instead of creating the environment where the company wants to make the investments in Canada. The failure that has happened here is the failure of this government. And it's a failure of the negotiation to remove the tariffs. What's amazing to me is Mark Carney said that this would all be resolved by July 21st. Of course, he's missed that deadline. In fact, tariffs have gotten worse. But even more shocking to me was the Prime Minister got up in question period last week and bragged about the fact that there's only a 10% tariff on Canadian autos, saying that's the best in the world. I've talked to Unifor auto workers, and they have told me that the 10% tariff is a tragedy for them. Like, this could mean the end of the Canadian auto industry if the tariff stays at 10%. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is saying 10% is a great deal. So he's either terribly informed or he has been informed and is just trying to put on some kind of a charade like he's doing something.
Well, I guess both can be true, that 10% might be better than other places, but because of the integration and the vulnerability and the profit margins of the Canadian auto industry, it's still fatal, right? And it's way worse than where it was at the beginning of the year. So it's one of those, it is cold comfort to everybody who has lost their jobs and fears losing their jobs. And I just wonder, what does a win look like for auto workers at this point in time? Because I'm sure you've seen the comments from Howard Lutnick, where he said auto assembly is going to be done in the U.S. Canada needs to figure out what it's going to do instead. It looks harder and harder to see what a win is here for Canada in this particular sector.
Well, that's their goal, right? That's what they've made very clear. They want all auto assembly. The challenge for us is two things. Number one, we're going into these negotiations in a really weakened bargaining position because of 10 years of poorly managing the Canadian economy. We can't build things in Canada. Bill C-69 stops us from building pipelines, building mines. Imagine if we had built up American reliance on rare earth metals, critical minerals, and we actually had alternative places to send our oil and gas. We'd be in a much stronger bargaining position to deal with these kinds of things. But on this particular issue, we put forward a platform for auto saying Canadian manufactured automobiles would be HST free.
Right.
And that would massively increase the demand for Canadian made automobiles that could offset all kinds of losses that we're experiencing. But they're not doing that. They're sending letters threatening to sue the company that's transferring jobs out of the country.
Look, I appreciate the argument that had the resource development policies been different, you could have a stronger overall economy with a higher gross domestic product. I mean, that has been a consistent position of the Conservatives. But to bring it down to the Windsor plants, and the Brampton plant, a new oil pipeline does not save the auto worker's job if Donald Trump has decided he's going to destroy the auto industry in Canada and force it to move to the United States, right? I mean, it maybe gives the government...
If you're at a stronger economy, right? If the United States had a reliance on the critical minerals that we should have been producing, but it takes 12 to 15 years to build a mine, if they were reliant upon the rare earth metals that we can produce here, if we had alternative places that we can send our oil and gas, these are all things that you can use when you're bargaining with someone to say, well, wait a minute, actually, we're not going to let you take all of these auto jobs because we can actually find markets for all these other things that you've grown reliant on that comes from Canada. So the weakening of the Canadian economy from all of these things is 100% relevant to the position we're in now. And even what they're trying to do, saying we're going to deal with the bureaucracy and how long it takes to get projects approved by creating a new bureaucracy that may approve certain projects, that's not the answer. We have to get rid of these impediments to massively build the Canadian economy so that we can actually have those kinds of bargaining tools and leverages when we're dealing with the United States.
Right, but look, there is no time machine to go back and change the decisions, right? So that is a hypothetical leverage play that could happen had other things been done. That's not where we are as a country right now. That's not where the economy is. So in the absence of those solutions, I mean, what is the step here? Because capital is going to go where it's easier to get a return and where it's just more certain. And right now, that is inside the lower 48 states of the United States and the continental U.S. for manufacturing, because they've decided to use their economy that is 10 times the size of ours as a massive leverage play against a once reliable partner.
Sure, and part of that is we have an industrial carbon tax that makes things like steel and other things that we produce more expensive that they won't get rid of. Another part of that are zero-emission vehicle mandates. The big three auto producers have said we've decoupled regulation in auto on zero emissions from the United States, and they've made decisions in auto that are now coming back to haunt them. All of these things need to be canceled and reversed. Plus, there is the Buy Canada plan that we put forward to manufacture autos here. If I had to choose between a car manufactured in the United States that I had to pay HST on, or choose between a car manufactured in Canada that doesn't have HST, I would choose to do that. If you eliminate all the regulatory uncertainty that exists in Canada because of all the legislation and other hurdles and red tape the Liberals have put in for the last 10 years, you would actually see capital wanting to come to Canada because we have so much opportunity here. So we're facing the double hit of a terribly managed economy for 10 years and a president that wants to take away Canadian jobs. We do have levers that we can still use, but this government seems completely unwilling to use them and pull them.
Right, but Donald Trump is not tariffing the Canadian economy because there's an industrial carbon price system. He's not tariffing the Canadian economy because of the EV mandates that was in place domestically and is now paused and being reviewed. He's tariffing the entire world. We're just getting hit the hardest because we're so reliant on the U.S. market and the economies are so intertwined. So I appreciate all the arguments you're making about domestic resilience, right, to build up our capacity here. But how do you solve this tariff issue? What is the move? What is the offer in the current context with the economy we have to change the president's mind on auto, on softwood lumber, and all of these other industries?
Well, look, I'm going to go back and say what I've said. You can't figure out what the answer is to deal with President Trump. No one's been able to figure that out right now. So what you actually have to do is you have to create that Canadian resilient economy so that you have more leverage at the bargaining table. We want to be able to compete for those investments with the United States. And to do that, we have to change the regulatory environment in Canada so businesses say, yeah, you know what, I want to open a mine here in Canada. I want to open a manufacturing facility here in Canada. You create that economic environment so that they want to choose that. And when you do all of these things, you're in a better position to bargain with the United States.
Right, but just as a final point, I mean, Mark Carney and his government would say that's what they're doing. I know you criticize the Major Projects Office as just more bureaucracy, but there have been some people in industry and business associations who say this is an agency with a clear focus and a clear mandate, and they believe it could help. we'll see what the end result is. But the Carney central pitch is they're going to build up the economy while trying to solve the U.S. issue.
Well, sure. So the government's going to pick projects. So you're not going to create the environment that private sector gets to compete for the best projects. We're going to have a Liberal government pick projects, the same Liberal government that operated the Green Slush Fund. And governments don't do great jobs of picking winners and losers. I always say that if the government is trying to pick winners and losers, they would have picked Betamax over VHS. And look where that ended up.
Well, we're digital and cloud now. Neither one of them.
To me is governments don't do great jobs of picking winners and losers. So you want to actually create the environment in the private sector that they're willing to risk capital and make the investments because they know the certainty of outcome. And we don't have any of that happening in Canada. And a projects office where Liberal backroom insiders are going to pick and choose which projects go ahead, I'm sorry, that is just not the answer. It's an opportunity for a green slush fund on a much larger scale.
Okay, Kyle Seeback, we're out of time. That's Conservative Labour critic Kyle Seeback. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thanks very much.